Jason, today's episode of the Lee Summit Town Hall podcast is brought to the good people by Budget Blinds of Lee Summit.
Budget Blinds!
Jason, I'm sure you knew this already, but I want to remind you, Budget Blinds is your home for the Signature Series shades.
All hail our robot shade overlords.
Hey, and right now is a great time to shop Budget Blinds of Lee Summit, especially if you take advantage of downtown Lee Summit's Love Local Passport program. There's a special deal in there just for Budget Blinds. So you need to go check that one out.
So are you telling me that we can have the security and efficiency and convenience of Signature Series shades with a deal?
With a deal, and all the while through you're supporting local business and a local business district.
Well, I mean, briefly pause the podcast, make the call, and then get back on the podcast.
Hey, and when you make that call, Jason, you know what they should do?
I bet they should tell them something.
They should tell them Jason and Nick sent them.
Hello again, and welcome to Lee Summit Town Hall, a weekly podcast about what you can do to make a difference. I'm Jason Norbury, and as always, I am joined by a man who's totally on board with running it back,
Woo-hoo!
except if it means he has to run. It's Nick Parker, the publisher of Link to Lee Summit. So I'm all for Patrick Mahomes running it back, but I don't want to be involved in the running part.
No, I want to watch. I want to watch the run it back.
Mostly, I just want like nachos and buffalo wings and the Chiefs winning. I'm good with that. That's fine.
Right.
We've given our part. We've done our part. We've signed up. So, no, absolutely. So, Link to Lee Summit, as always, is the source for all the news you need about our very fine community. And our unofficial sponsor today is the light at the end of the tunnel.
Jason, you and I are not going to talk much today.
No. Well, we're going to talk. We've already talked.
We've already talked. Hey, look, there's a couple little things I want to go over, and then we're going to move on to do an interview. And really, it's an overdue interview that you and I have. But first, let's talk about a couple little pieces of news. First off, let's start with the Lee Summit R7 School District. Jason, there was a lawsuit filed a couple years ago against the district alleging discrimination during the hiring practice for an open position. It was at that time the communications director post. And that lawsuit by Danielle Nixon has now been settled. And you can get full details on the settlement and even a little bit of analysis from a guest columnist on our website at Link to Lee Summit.
Yeah, I don't have much more to say about that other than, hey, look, lawsuits, these things happen. The bigger question that we're not going to tackle here is if there was a problem, is that whatever was the problem is still a problem now or not? And if the district hasn't fixed it, then that's an issue. Not so much these things happening. An organization as public and as large as the city or the school district is going to get sued on a pretty regular basis from unhappy employees, rightfully or wrongfully so. So it's going to happen. And it's one of those things that comes up. So I don't want to make a huge issue of it or get into because the settlement agreement's going to have probably some language about nobody's admitting fault and we have to do this and that. And there's a lot of stuff in there. So it's not dispositive of anything, but there is some analysis to be had if you want to read the guest columnist analysis of that and see where that is and get more information on it. You go for it.
Well, and I think one of the hard things I think as you watch stuff like this happen, Jason, is that it's easy to forget that a lot of times the outcome is determined by the defendant's insurance company and their determination of what is the most cost-effective end to this scenario. Absolutely.
So, and so as a former practicing lawyer, recovering attorney, if you will, my cynicism, not cynicism, it's just, I don't get too excited about lawsuits because they end up like this, right? Even, whether the plaintiff's claims were completely meritorious or completely made up, the net outcome is usually something like this. A check is cut to make the process end in what both sides determine is the most convenient way as a whole. So, it does, just because it's a settlement doesn't tell us a whole lot about that. But that's the way our system kind of functions. In a lot of ways, there's not very, every 1,000 cases that get of this nature that get filed, like one goes to a verdict. And
that's an interesting stat. And I know you're just kind of,
that's a completely made up stat
generalization
but I mean, it's just such a huge quantity. They settle, or they get dismissed, or the plaintiff runs out of money to keep the lawyer happy, and the suit kind of dies on the vine, or just stuff happens, and so we don't get often like a real resolution, even in the situations where the defendant, in this case would it be the school district, but even if the defendant in this case were completely in the wrong and everything they said was true, the fact of a settlement doesn't give us that information. It just says that that was the number that made it stop sooner rather than later. Right. So it's just a thing. And then once again, if this is a continuing pattern, and I know this had to do with the prior superintendent and some other attendant, things that went along with that. If this is a pattern that continues, and that's something to pay attention to, but it seems that a lot of the things that we don't know yet what the next set of lawsuits are going to look like. So it's hard really to draw a lot of conclusions from it.
The last note before we get to our interview is, Jason, hey, filing period is over for the Board of Education election coming up in April. So over the course of the next few weeks and 2 months until that election, Jason, I will be working to schedule our candidate interviews. So if you have questions, you have topics you think that you want to make sure that we cover as we talk to these candidates, and we help you get set to make the decisions for who takes those 2 seats on the board, let us know. You can reach out to us, nick@linktolessummit.com, or Link to Lee Summit on the Facebook, or on Twitter @LS Town Hall.
Absolutely. Looking forward to those interviews again.
I enjoy doing those every election cycle. I think it's a good opportunity for us just personally to get to know the candidates, but I think also too just to put out there how they stand on some issues, and to be able to follow up with some of their answers. Jason, I want to move over now to an interview we actually conducted last week in preparation for this week's episode. When we first started this podcast, we'd kind of set a goal to try and show how easy it was for people to get involved and to support different things happening in our community. And we interviewed a lot of nonprofits, and we've still done that over, as you pointed out, Jason, we are nearing a 4th year of this podcast. But we missed one along the way, and so finally we're going to sit down with Phil Hanson of the Truman Heartland Community Foundation, talk to him a little bit about what they do and how they manage several different funds and things that help out in our community.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to being, I think, as you put it, a long overdue interview with one of the sort of larger players in the nonprofit funding space here in Eastern Jackson County, it also, it has, I would say, I think the most tax talk that we have ever had as an interview.
That's true.
On the thing. And that's not the
reason. And
we've
actually interviewed a CPA or two.
Right. And so just put that, but there's some issues in there, but I think it's interesting when you start thinking about money. We hear billionaires starting foundations and doing all this massive stuff. And those of us who have regular human jobs and incomes and lifestyles don't, our philanthropic efforts do not have that many zeros attached to it. So it's an interesting, Truman Heartland is an interesting way to help leverage the money that you do have to give in a lot of different ways, both for your benefit, for tax benefits, if that makes sense, but also potentially for the benefit of a broader organization, letting Phil and company do a lot of the work. So with that, here's our interview with Phil. We're here with Phil Hanson, the president and CEO of the Truman Heartland Community Foundation. Phil, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
I'm going to take a moment, and while we're recording it on air, to compliment you. We are recording this on Friday, and Phil has appropriately tied himself with
my official Chiefs tie. Yeah.
with some Red Friday gear. I have failed Red Friday in its entirety. I even almost forgot it was Friday, let alone Red Friday today. But we're here. We have not had you or anyone from the foundation on, and so we thought it'd be a great opportunity.
Really is what this is. We're sorry.
Yeah, we're sorry. And in order to make up for our obvious failure to follow through, we wanted to have you on to just talk a little bit about what the foundation is and what you guys do. So, Phil, what is the Truman Heartland Community Foundation?
Well, it's got many different aspects to it, but basically, we're a foundation that's owned by the community, and hence the name Community Foundation. So we work with literally hundreds of charitable people throughout primarily the eastern Jackson County part of town to pool their charitable gifts, create a common foundation that they can utilize for the charitable purposes that are important to them. So, unlike the Hall Family Foundation, that's, a foundation just for that family, this really is owned by, run by members of the community. So we've got over 750 different funds that are part of the foundation. And last year, in 2020, we had $5.4 million in total grants and scholarships that went out to various charities. So there are a lot of different aspects of the foundation that I'm sure we can get into as we talk further.
How does that actually work, and how do you, I guess, or what do you do then as the manager of all of these different funds? Kind of what is your role in keeping track of those, in funneling the directions they all want to go?
Yeah, it depends on the type of fund. I serve as the president and CEO. We've got a small staff here. There are 6.5 FTEs, seven bodies. So we're all juggling a lot of balls, as you can imagine. So we're a not-for-profit. We have a board of directors that's a self-perpetuating board. Many members of the community, I'm sure, that you'd recognize, and St. Lee Summit is a key part of our area, and a lot of folks from Lee Summit that serve on our board of directors. So an important part of what we do each year is we have a community grants process, and that's really coming up soon, so it might be timely to talk about today, in that we have a number of funds that people have left to us, many of them through estate gifts. J.D. Browning is a good example of a Lee Summit resident who created a endowed fund here with us now 9 years ago that is really directed at the Lee Summit community. So as part of that competitive grants process, each year nonprofits in the Lee Summit community can apply for grants. Then we have a grants committee that makes the decisions on those. It includes representatives that are part of the Lee Summit Advisory Board. So in addition to our corporate board of directors, we also have 4 different advisory boards in the community. One of those being in Lee Summit, where we've got an 18-member board, and a lot of those volunteers participate on various committees, including that grants committee, in making those decisions. So there's lots of opportunities there for people to get engaged with the foundation.
So tell us a little bit about the community. So if you are a nonprofit in Lee Summit or one of the other communities here in, though we don't need to talk about those other communities on this podcast. If you are one of those and this deadline's coming up, so what kinds of projects or programs typically come and apply for the kinds of these grants? I mean, are some of them, like some of these family, very specific as we're going to fund things in only this narrow area, or are a lot of things broader than that?
Yeah, and I'm referring to our community competitive grants process here. I mean, and we can talk a little bit about the donor advised funds, where it's a particular family that has a fund. But it's pretty broad based, and we've got a lot of good information about it on our website, which is thcf.org. And the applications for grants will be coming up in March. We'll actually be having a workshop next month for organizations that are interested in applying. But it covers the gamut. So there are a lot of social services that are funded through this. So grants to organizations like Lee Summit Social Services, Coldwater has gotten grants over the years from us, but also arts organizations. So Lee Summit Symphony, Lee Summit Historical Society have been grant recipients of our competitive grants process. So it's pretty broad based, and we really encourage people to check out the information on our website and apply.
Let's make sure we're very clear on when this process is, because you said it's coming up. So when does it begin, and how long do people have?
The applications are due in March. I don't know the specific dates, but if they go to the website, you can check that out. And then we do have a orientation workshop that's coming up here in February.
And I think I noticed a recent news release from your organization too, that there's a scholarship.
Yep.
Scholarships available too, and we are in that time frame right now as well. So I guess let's talk a little bit about that and scholarship funds and things that are available for students.
Okay. Yeah, scholarships is another very important part of what we do. So we have 124 different scholarship funds that we made scholarships out of this past year, and we are now, as you pointed out, right at the beginning of that scholarship season, and that students should be going to our website now and making application for scholarships. Last year, we gave out 326 different scholarships. It's $470,000 worth of scholarships that were given out. So it really is an important part of what we do, and we're getting into the busy period for scholarships right now.
Are there? I guess, can you get into maybe some of the areas that are available for students, like the study areas?
It really depends by scholarship. Some of them are particular to students graduating from a particular high school in the area. A few of them are focused on particular areas of study, although we really try to work with our donors to make sure they're broad enough that it's not, too narrow of a criteria for a particular scholarship. So there's literally 124 of them. So then they all look a little bit different. So no matter what area a student was interested in studying, there's probably something out there that would pertain to them in one of our scholarship funds. So.
And once again, they can find out more, and they can check that out if they go to your website,
right? Which
is thcf.org.
Right.
We'll try to keep saying that for you. You just said something about working with donors to make sure things weren't too broad. So I'm curious a little bit. Let's talk some about like what you do with all of these different funds and how you work with them to make sure that they're getting the impact on the community that they want.
Yeah. So another piece where we work with a lot of different donors are what's called donor advised funds. So this is really a simplified version of having your own family foundation, but you're sharing that infrastructure, if you will, with hundreds of other families in the community. So we have about 225 different families that we work with that have a donor advised fund. So basically people can put money into that fund. When they do that is when they get the charitable tax deduction for that gift. Then they can make grants out of that fund to nonprofits in the community of their choosing. So it could be their church, their alma mater, local social services. It doesn't have to be a local organization, but most of the grants that we make are. And we have grants that are happening on a weekly basis that are coming out of these donor advised funds. And in fact, last year we saw a big jump in grants from these funds. It went from $1.5 million in 2019 to $1.8 million. And we saw a big influx of grants that went to nonprofits who were trying to deal with the COVID-19 situation and all the families that are in need and are still in need. All those folks are unemployed. from jobs that may not be coming back. So we work closely with each of those individuals, but it's really up to them on what their hot buttons are in terms of charitable giving. We verify that those organizations that they want to make a grant to are certified not-for-profits and good standing with the IRS, but it really is their choice on who they want to fund. We often will, talk with folks. They'll say, "I'm interested in this type of organization," and we can provide them information on the nonprofits that are doing good work in that area within the community. So they all look a little bit different. But donor advised funds, we've seen a lot of interest lately, particularly with the tax law changes that we had at the end of 2017, where the standard deduction was raised. So it's like $25,000 now. So if you don't have deductions that are above that level, there's really no tax benefit to you. So we've seen a lot of people who are using a donor advised fund to bunch their charitable giving. So they'll put in a large amount in year one, and they'll be able to exceed the standard deduction, get some tax benefit from that. Continue to make grants out to their favorite nonprofits over the next several years, and then replenish the amount in that fund, say in year 3 or 4, and again be able to get some tax benefit for doing that. But people also use a donor advised fund for when they're in their peak earning years, and as you're planning for retirement, right, you're putting money away for things you're going to do in retirement. If you are charitable, you're probably going to continue doing that when you're retired. So if you put the money into this donor advised fund in those peak earning years, then you can get the tax advantage of that now when you still need that, not when you don't have income later, and then have that money put aside in this particular pool that you can then keep supporting the charities that you care about in your retirement. So it's a real simple tool, but one that can be very, very powerful for people.
Phil, I think you have taken the crown for the person who's talked most about tax policy on this podcast. So I'm not sure if congratulations are in order, but we did. I wanted to say that's the first time I think we've ever uttered the phrase enhanced standard deduction on the podcast. So good job. Good job on that.
Hopefully your watchers won't be like, no.
Trust me. You cannot be more boring and dry about like legislation than I get on a weekly basis on our podcast. So you are fine. You did mention
Jason is a former bankruptcy attorney.
Yeah, I'm a former bankruptcy attorney, so it falls right into my thing. You mentioned the pandemic, and as we say virtually every week, COVID has ruined everything. Obviously, you mentioned that it has increased the desire to give, as well as I think the need to do that. How has it impacted the foundation and what you guys have done over the last year?
Yeah, well, when the shutdown happened back in March, one of the things we immediately did was start communicating even more, particularly with those donor advised fund holders that I was just talking about, to let them know about here is how the situation is impacting these various nonprofits. Here's the needs that they have. And we saw a $240,000 in grants responding to that kind of request and going to these nonprofits who were trying to react and hang on during that time period, where they're really having to figure out how do they do business differently, and going from having a food pantry that people came into to doing drive-through things. So there was a lot of activity going on there. So we did see great response from that, and we did see the total grants coming out of those donor advised funds last year go from 1.5 million to 1.8. So it wasn't just shifting money around. In other words, it really was a true outpouring of support to nonprofits. I mean, those needs, a lot of those needs are still there because there's still a lot of hurt that's going on. When you look at see what's happened in the stock market is not reflecting what's going on Main Street, as you guys know. So there's still a lot of work to be done in that area, and we continue to urge people to respond generously.
Well, I want to ask this one. So, if I am I am of a family that wants to give, I have a nonprofit. How can I get involved? How can I maybe contact Truman Heartland Community Foundation and try to put funds that we have to work for the community?
Yep. Well, we're happy to sit down with folks at any time, whether virtual or in person, to talk about what their charitable interests are. And, if they're interested in education, we can talk about scholarship funds. If it's broader than that, we can talk about these donor advice funds as an instrument. We do have, as I mentioned, an advisory board in Lee Summit that's actively involved in working with us on various committees. So if somebody has interest in that, we can submit their name to the particular nominating committee for the Lee Summit Advisory Board as they're looking to bring on new members. So,
what are you looking for in people to join these community advisory boards? And like you said, there is one for our community here in Lee Summit. But who are you looking for? What kind of person are you looking to come really join that group and help the efforts?
Well, ideally, they're going to be somebody who's already actively engaged in other activities in the community. So, for instance, if you're going to serve on our grants committee, it's great to have people who are engaged in the community and know about different organizations there that can provide that input. That doesn't apply to everybody. But we're also looking for financial advisors. So if somebody is a money manager, or they're a CPA, or they may be a estate planning attorney. We don't need bankruptcy attorneys.
That's fine.
Nobody wants them
There's
around.
a call for those, but it's not through you guys. That's perfectly fine.
It's not for us. Yeah. So we people come from all walks of life, but typically people who are actively engaged can bring that knowledge to the table as we're trying to make decisions. Because like in that community grants process, each year we'll have 3 times the amount of requests money-wise than what we have available to spend. So there's some tough decisions that need to be made there. Giving away money is, believe it or not, can be incredibly difficult. You have to make those kind of decisions. So a variety of folks.
So let me go there. So obviously one of the interesting and neat things about the foundation is that it is a magnifier of your impact, financially speaking. I mean, you referenced the Hall Family Foundation, and they have money sloshing in and out of there in the millions and millions of dollars. And I can speak safely for Nick and I that neither of us have that kind of money that we have set aside for charitable giving. But how much do you really need to? I mean, obviously, I'm assuming the number is much smaller for wanting to be able to give to sort of hop in and help do what you guys are doing. What is a typical range of gifts that you guys start with?
Mm-hmm. Good question. You can start a donor advice fund with $5,000. That's our minimum to get it established. So they range from $5,000 to $1 million. So that they vary in sizes. If you're looking at creating a scholarship fund, what we're asking folks to do is to endow that, meaning that we're not going to dip into the principal. We're just going to spend what's earned in the market on that fund. And in that case, we look at a minimum of $25,000 to set up a scholarship fund. So that would generate about $1,000 scholarship each year to make it a meaningful amount that's being given out. And sometimes people will do that over several years to, here's my goal to get it to here in year 3. So they may take several years to build it up to that level before we start doing scholarships out of that fund. So it doesn't have to be a huge amount of money for somebody to create their own, donor advice fund. Again, simplified way of having a family foundation. So.
Well, fantastic. Well, Phil, before we wrap up here, I want to make sure, is there anything else you'd like to let people know about getting involved, about being a part of the Truman Heartland Community Foundation, or maybe let people know of some of the things you guys are working on?
Yeah, two other things that I'd like to kind of chat about. One is our Youth Advisory Council. we have from 12 different high schools, about 160 students who are engaged in what I often refer to as our School of Philanthropy. And one of the things that these students do is work alongside our grants committee. So when we get these proposals from nonprofits, and if it's dealing with services to children or youth, they're assigned that grant proposal. They do site visits, come back to the grants committee and say, here's our perspective, here's what we think on this grant proposal. And the cool thing is that the adults on this grants committee, they truly value what these students have to say and their input. And I've seen it impact decisions both ways in terms of particular proposals. They also have established their own endowed fund, and they get to make the sole decisions on the grants coming out of that, from the earnings from that endowment. And that fund's now over $80,000 that they've built up. In fact, they're doing a fundraiser in March where we're doing a drive-in movie concept where they'll be encouraging other students to come. So all the proceeds from that will help build up their endowment fund. So it's kind of a unique program. When I think about it, I don't know of any other activity in the area where students from all these different high schools come together when it's not about competition, right? I mean, that's the only other time you see the schools intersect. But here it's about coming together to build a better community. And it really is a great experience for these students. So we're just now getting into the recruitment effort on that, but we have a youth advisory council team in all the different Lee Summit high schools, and would encourage students who are interested in learning more about that, contact us, and there's information on our website about that. Our orientation this year is going to have to be virtual, so we're kind of working through all of that. But we're looking for students who really have a heart for service and want to learn about philanthropy and how the community works together. So there's that opportunity coming up now.
That's a fantastic goal. It's always good to recruit people to help the community, but to start with the youth and teach them that early, and how easy it is to do, right? To get involved in those things at an early age, then it just becomes a habit as they grow into adults. That's a fantastic program.
We hope so. The other thing that's kind of a key initiative for us is what we call job skills for new careers. And really, we were launching this right in the midst of the pandemic.
Well, always the best time to start things.
Always the best time. We're working very closely with 3 other organizations that are our collaboration partners. Community Services League is one of those, which is a social service organization based in Independence, but they've got locations throughout Eastern Jackson County area. And then we're also working closely with UCM, particularly with their innovation campus out there in Lee Summit, and Mid-Continent Public Library is also a partner. But basically what we're trying to do is help folks who are in those dead-end, low-wage jobs that could be, and frankly, many of them are the jobs that have gone away and aren't coming back now with the pandemic, but somebody who really may have their high school diploma, but with just a little bit more training, for instance, could become a certified nurse assistant and could be earning a much better wage with benefits, a way out of, path out of poverty for their family with the training that they can receive. And then Community Service League also works with them in terms of financial counseling, providing other assistance so they can, hit the pause button in life, still be able to pay their rent and get this training that they need. So, what we have done is reached out to, again, those folks who have those donor advice funds with us and asked them to support that training effort. And in 2019, we had $120,000 in grants that were made from these folks to support that kind of training. There were 95 folks who were able to be trained in the process. And then we also had a $60,000 grant that we were able to get from the Kauffman Foundation to help support this effort. So, there were some really crazy things that we had to react to because of the pandemic, where you can't do trainings of people face to face. If there's one bright thing that came out of it is that several organizations that need certified nurse assistants in the Lee Summit area, we had John Knox Village and St. Luke's, and also Truman Medical Center Lakewood, who ended up to work around some of the restrictions on, if you weren't an employee, right, you couldn't come into the building. So you couldn't come in to finish up your practical training part of the job of the CNA because they couldn't let you in. So the workaround, they ended up hiring these people prior, screening them that there's somebody we want to have on board as an employee, and paid them while they were going through the training so that they could complete it. So we're hoping that may be a model that sticks as we go forward, because there's a lot of benefits to that approach. So
that is a nice highlight to come out of what was, what has been really, really difficult times for everybody. Well, Phil, I want to thank you for giving us your time today, for sitting down with us. We joked a little bit, but I think we do apologize that it is taking us this long on the podcast to get to the Truman Heartland Community Foundation. It's nice to finally speak with you and get some information out to people on what you do and how they can get involved. So thank you. We appreciate it.
We appreciate the opportunity, and happy to come back in the future.
We'll have you. Thank you, Phil.
Okay.
Well, that will wrap us up for this episode. We'll talk to everybody next time.